How's it going, guys, and welcome back to the Purple Box, the semi-regularly posted series where I try to chronicle every non-unique purple weapon in Borderlands 3 to let you know whether it's trash, treasure, or completely inconsequential. If you'd like to give any of the weapons showcased in this video a go, a save file containing all of them will be available in my Discord server linked down in the description. But with that out of the way, COV for when all that garbage you've got lying around your gamer den just isn't quite stabby enough. COV weapons generally sport very low accuracy with higher fire rates and higher bullet counts. COV also has bottomless mags, never needing to reload. Instead, they have a heat system which fills the longer that you fire. At max, you have a chance to overheat, causing the weapon to break and needing a quick repair animation. COV also has the more and more prefixes, adding 1 and 2 bonus projectiles to the weapons respectively. This does, however, also increase the ammo cost per shot to match that of the amount of bullets fired, as COV are engine-driven guns. Upon swapping over to one before you're able to fire, there's a quick animation of turning the gun on. Most COV weapons are able to come in every single element, however there are a couple exceptions to that, which are unable to roll as non-elemental, but I will point those out as we get to them. Starting out with pistols, we have the Holy Man, coming in with the lowest base damage, but the highest fire rate after a short spin-up time. With the ×3, yeah, this thing just eats through fucking ammo like a fat kid in a buffet. The damage is pretty damn good, but the actual upkeep of that damage is fucking awful, because not only are you chewing through ammo, but by the time that you're actually fully spun up, you're practically in the red on heat already, just praying to get lucky that the gun doesn't instantly overheat. And by the time you do probably get lucky and actually are able to fire this at its full fire rate for an extended period of time, your ammo pool is going to be non-existent. ×2 does have slightly lower overall DPS, but honestly not by that much. The problem still is that it fucking shits through your ammo pool. With the ×1 though, the heat is far more manageable than ×2 and ×3. Ammo consumption is lower, though still definitely high with that crazy fire rate. But that being said though, the gun fucking throws lead like no other and is fun as hell, still with solid damage. Simply gun go burr. Moving to the Splainer, showing off the highest damage but the lowest fire rate. At ×3, this damage is fucking unbelievable. For being a purple weapon, this thing more than keeps up, like genuinely better than some legendaries. While the fire rate is lower, it's still decent enough to pump out pretty damn good DPS. Absolutely destroys your ammo pool though, which may be a recurring theme with these ×3s. Moving down to the ×2 though, while it does have less overall just raw damage, the DPS is similar enough while not shredding your ammo as hard as the ×3. I think this is definitely the Splainer's sweet spot, as with ×1 you definitely get noticeably lower DPS than ×3 and ×2, but the ammo consumption is also way down. That being said though, while it does have lower damage, the damage is still really good. It's definitely very usable, and also could be argued that this is the better option than the ×2 if you are going more for just general long-term usability over just straight damage. Moving on to the Preacher, this pistol has our balance stats, meaning that it comes in between the Splainer and the Holy Man. Specifically, on average, it has a higher fire rate than the Splainer, but lower damage, and a higher damage than the Holy Man, but lower fire rate. Somehow, the ×3 and the ×2 of the Preacher actually felt incredibly similar damage-wise. Obviously, the ×3 definitely ate through way more ammo than the ×2, but both consumed ammo at a pretty quick rate due to that higher fire rate. ×1, however, was still very solid with a much more reasonable ammo consumption. And while there was a slight dip in DPS, it honestly felt pretty similar across the board between ×1 and ×3, and overall was just a pretty standard and pretty good pistol with solid damage and a solid fire rate. Interesting to note though, it does average a higher DPS than the Splainer, but with faster ammo consumption, and while similar DPS to the Holy Man, offers less overheating and slower ammo consumption. It really did feel like a perfect middle ground between those two. And finally, for our pistols, we have the Blasphemy. The Blasphemy is only elemental and shoots slow-moving projectiles which stick into enemies and explode after a brief delay. Now, the ×3 had surprisingly good damage. I was like actually kind of shocked and kind of excited when I saw it just absolutely nuke an HP bar. Then I noticed it was doing the exact same thing to my ammo pool, because this thing consumed 4 ammo per fucking shot, and the ×2 doesn't make it too much better. You still have a higher ammo consumption because you're taking ×2. You have the ammo consumption on this thing of a normal ×3, but now you're getting worse damage. But the ×1 ammo consumption is finally a little bit okay, but the damage is kinda not great. And on top of all of that, just this gun isn't that fun. You're firing a bunch of slow-moving projectiles that you have to then wait to actually get your damage out of. And because of that, you end up using a lot more ammo than you need to on enemies, whether it be you're just putting way too many darts in them, or you're just missing. Overall though, the COV pistols fucking slap. While there's definitely some drawbacks, and the blasphemy, at the most basic core, COV pistols deal damage and they deal damage fast. Generally, I find ×2 to be where it's at, as with ×2, you get a good balance of a hell of a lot of DPS output and not too terrible ammo consumption, though ×1 and ×3 do definitely still have their place. But no matter the role, you can pick up a COV pistol and melt through an enemy with it. Unless it's the blasphemy, then it's a little bit more questionable. Moving from pistols to assault rifles, let's start with the rat-a-tatter. Very similar to the Holy Man, having a low damage with a very high fire rate after a brief spin-up time. With the ×3, this thing definitely throws out bullets at a very high volume, however that lower damage can definitely be felt. While it did still kill pretty quick, it was definitely a lower damage option from other COV guns. And of course, still being a ×3, it shredded through your ammo. The ×2, however, it did have a similar DPS to the ×3, but with far better ammo consumption and way easier heat management, actually able to somewhat sustain that max fire rate for a little bit longer. With the ×1 though, your damage takes a massive hit. Ammo and heat problems are practically non-existent though, surprisingly enough, despite having that massive fire rate, but at a very steep cost to your DPS. Next up is the Perforator, having the highest damage but the lowest fire rate. With the ×3, that higher damage is definitely felt. This thing absolutely slaps, however what else is felt is that lower fire rate. While still being decent, it is very noticeable that it is lower, and you will actually struggle to sustain DPS on an enemy, as there is a pretty decent downtime between each shot, which isn't just an issue to the ×3, it is just an issue to the Perforator. With the ×2, your damage actually felt better than the ×3, however the fire rate is still a bit of an issue and it still overheats very quickly. It is really good while actually firing the thing, but it spends far too much time not firing. With ×1, your damage is still very good, but it still is overheating super fast and it's still having that issue with having a far lower fire rate. Overall, the Perforator is a solid option, but honestly, I find it worse than our next one, the Berserker. Berserker comes in with balanced stats, somewhere between the Perforator and the rat-a-tatter, and with the ×3, this thing fucking shreds through enemies. The damage is really solid and the fire rate is really good, but as hard as it shreds through enemies, it will also shred through your ammo as well. However, because of the DPS that you can pump out with this, you are still going to kill a decent amount of enemies before you do run out of ammo. And on top of that, this was some of the easiest time I've had managing my heat with a ×3. It wasn't just constantly breaking. With the ×2, there was definitely a slight drop in DPS from the ×3, but overall it wasn't too bad either. The slightly lower time to kill with the lower ammo consumption seemed to almost perfectly balance out between ×3 and ×2, and I ended up pretty much running through just as many enemies with each. ×1 definitely had less upfront damage than ×3, but while noticeable from ×2, the difference didn't feel too big. The ×1 definitely did have some benefits over the other two though, having a far easier time at longer ranges and way less ammo issues and a far easier time managing heat. It is worth noting with the Berserker that while it is supposed to be the balanced COV AR, again meaning that it averages a fire rate and damage between the Perforator and the rat-a-tatter, it's not actually that far off in damage from the Perforator, meaning it can very well outperform some Perforators with similar damage, as with that added fire rate, it can have an overall better DPS. And finally, for the assault rifles, we have the Whisperer, our alien barrel COV assault rifle. The Whisperer fires out a continuous beam of damage, which actually gets a damage increase up to a max cap of either ×2 or ×4, the longer that you fire it for. Now, between the ×2 and the ×4 damage variants, the only difference that you will notice on the card is that it will consume 4 ammo per shot instead of 2 ammo per shot. Now, with the 4 ammo per shot, the damage is actually great, but the ammo consumption is definitely felt. It definitely doesn't have that great uptime of damage because you will run out of ammo very quick, and on top of that, it is overheating constantly. And with the 2 ammo per shot, the damage was definitely a surprise, however, that was simply on the basis that it was able to kill. That was the surprise. It can't really kill too well. It'll melt through enemies, but it'll melt them like a popsicle on a nice winter's day. But just to compare these two further, here's some math. With the 2 ammo per shot, you get a 57,000 damage per tick at the max charge. With 4 ammo per shot, you're getting 66k at max, which is a 9,000 or about 15.8% increase in damage, which sounds kinda decent. But how does this work out with that ammo consumption? Well, at 57,000 for 2 ammo, that gives you around 28.5 thousand damage per ammo. At 66,000 for 4 ammo, that's giving you 16.5 thousand per ammo. Either way, this gun isn't that great, but there's some numbers to put behind it. COV ARs are pretty damn good, especially among their other non-unique peers. They're pretty similar in strength and function to their pistol counterparts, just with more prominent drawbacks. Each and every one of them is just as perfectly usable, however, there's definitely more of a reliance on having good rolls. I also personally believe that there is a clear winner in the Berserker, as it just has the best overall stats, but the Perforator is definitely usable, and the Rat-a-Tatter, while slightly less so, is still definitely solid. And finally, let's take a look at our launchers, perhaps the most disappointing category, and also the only category which only comes in ×1 and ×2. Starting with the Zuka, which has an arcing projectile with pretty low range but decently high splash radius and high fire rate. And with the ×2, you're using 2 launcher ammo per shot, which is pretty steep for the depressing damage that this thing outputs. Like, this thing will barely kill trash mobs, and the ×1 isn't much fucking better. It does showcase the strengths of this launcher better than the ×2, as the ×2 overheats way too fast to really make use of that very high fire rate. But that being said, again, the damage is still really bad. I did end up having some fun with this launcher though, as because I was playing Zane, the interaction that this has with Eraser and that spawning of another projectile is pretty enjoyable to play around with, and if you lined it up correctly where you hit both the Eraser shot and the normal shot, you could actually kill things pretty quickly with this. So I suppose it has that very single interaction with a broken still going for it. Next is the Shredder, which shoots out saw blades that have a heavy arc to them and will run along the ground toward the target. The Shredder is also full auto with a pretty high fire rate, and while both of those sound great, it is incredibly bad for a launcher that consumes 2 to 3 ammo per shot. With the ×4, 3 ammo per shot one, you're pretty much only getting like a second or two of firing before you're just completely run dry. And with the ×2, it's honestly not that much better. You get like a couple more seconds, but you're still gonna run out very quick, which is quite unfortunate because the damage of the Shredders is actually pretty good. It's nothing too amazing and still decently disappointing for the fact that it uses launcher ammo, but this could have been a fun gun if not for that ammo consumption. And then we come to the Chukka, which is a continuous fire of only elemental damage. This is some flamethrower type shit and therefore has some very limited range on it. It is also worth noting that this does not get any sort of splash damage boost or heavy weapon damage boost for some reason. It also doesn't show a ×2 next to the damage for the ×2 version. The only difference on the card is going to be that it has a higher ammo consumption going from 1 to 2. The damage on the card is also going to look lower than the ×1, however this actually isn't true and you do get a damage increase for having the ×2 variant. Speaking of the ×2, I would love to talk about the damage of this thing, but it's really not worthwhile because I killed a solid enemy and a half before completely running out of ammo. So instead we'll move to the ×1 and talk about the damage of this thing because it is deeply upsetting. Like, I am furious that this thing costs launcher ammo for the pitiful amount of damage I get out of it, and I would like to speak to the manager, please. And on top of that, ×1 barely solves the ammo problem. You're still gonna run out pretty damn quick. It's just that you're gonna kill even less with it. And while that was the last of the COVs that can actually drop in-game, I wanted to include as a little bonus the Bombination. This gun is not able to drop legitimately, but it can be created through save editing. It is an alien barrel COV launcher, always elemental, and a much lower fire rate with an arcing elemental projectile. You can make a ×1 and a ×2 variant, but who knows if this was actually ever intentional or not. The Bombination is practically identical to the Zuka, aside from having that slower fire rate and a lower splash radius. It is a definitely safe assumption that it was supposed to have some other bonus effect to it that was just never properly added before it got scrapped. It is definitely unfinished, but I thought it would be neat to showcase anyways. COV launchers are disappointing to say the least, for how awesome and badass they look with their cool, unique, and interesting projectiles. It is really a shame that they're utter fucking trash, Jesus Christ! COV weapons are fucking brutal. They look brutal, they feel brutal. They just spew out high volumes of lead to completely shred through whatever the hell decided to make the mistake of standing in front of you. From aesthetics to gameplay, COV fucking kills it. Pistols have DPS to compete with legendaries. ARs, while definitely weaker, are still damn solid for purples, especially the Berserker, my beloved. It's just a hell of a shame that the launchers all have some major drawbacks to them. But that's gonna about do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, all that. Down in the description is a link to my Twitch channel where I will be live right after this video goes up, along with, as I said, a link to my Discord server where you can come and join and hang out, or download the save file of guns used in this video. But with that all being said, said, I hope to see you guys in the next one.